Welcome, climate viewers. This is Jim Lee from ClimateViewer News at ClimateViewer.com. We're going to continue our story on the very complicated history of chemtrails. In our previous videos, we covered the birth of the word chemtrails in 1997 and how it relates to NATO and the single fuel concept from 1988 to 1997 when the word was first used. In the last video, we covered the history of vapor trails from 1948 till the state of Illinois and New Jersey sued the airline industry in 1970 and a little beyond that. Today, we're going to dig into the modern push to alter clouds created by planes, and that is jet biofuels. So we're going to dig deep into that. We're only like 13 subscribers away from 24,000. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. We got up to 23,990, and YouTube is slowly whittling away at them, and it's down to 23,983. And I've had many people report to me that they've been unsubscribed and they didn't click the button. So if you're, just double check that real quick for me. I'd greatly appreciate it because we got to get over this hump. I swear YouTube does not want me growing this channel, and it's only through loving climate viewers like you that I'm able to do so. Let's jump right into it. So we're going to go over here to weathermodificationhistory.com. I'm going to pack this in really fast, and I hope that you guys can follow along. All the links will be in a pinned comment on this YouTube video afterwards, so don't worry, you'll be able to keep up, or at least review the material yourself. Make your own judgment. Jimmy Nutsack, what's up? Thank you for joining Quantum, Simi, Joseph, Michael, Dr. Scotty Jones, Miranda. All right, so here we go. Clouded judgment. Do contrails increase cloud cover? This is December 1980. Now, back in 1980, this was about where we ended the video previously on the first period of what they called vapor trails or smoke pollution of the sky. And up to this point, they were, even though there was public outcry over planes farting in the sky and contrails turning into cirrus clouds and blocking out the sun as early as 1958. 1948 is one of the first mentions that I even see of, planes leaving trails. And in 1980, they try to spin it on the mainstream media news. And we're just going to play that for you right now.
On clear days, you can often see long white lines being traced high in the sky. They are contrails of jet aircraft, actually long, slender clouds. Weathermen are finding them especially fascinating because a theory is being developed that those long white lines may be changing our weather for the better. Details from Roger O'Neill.
The exhaust from jet engines, usually seen as long, thin trails of white clouds behind high-flying jet airplanes, may be a big reason why there are 30 fewer days of sunshine a year in the Midwest now than there were in 1900. The daily range between high and low temperatures has also narrowed. Weather researchers studying cloud cover in 10 Midwestern states found a sharp increase in cloudiness with the increase in commercial jet travel. Particularly in the main east-west jet corridor, there were even more clouds. A jet produces a contrail, or cloud, because its exhaust consists primarily of water vapor.
In the absence of natural clouds, given the correct atmospheric conditions, jet aircraft in high frequency can almost completely cover the atmosphere, visible atmosphere, with clouds.
Simonin says unlike most changes in the atmosphere caused by man, this one is beneficial. Clouds help farmers in the Midwest by blocking the sun. Temperature extremes can damage plants and speed up the evaporation of soil moisture. In the winter, city people benefit because clouds act as a blanket, preventing warm air from escaping into the atmosphere. No one is trying to make clouds now using jet engines, but this study suggests that jet travel is inadvertently making our days more cloudy. And someday, weather researchers may be able to use jets on purpose to change our weather. Roger O'Neill, NBC.
And someday we may be able to use jets to change our weather on purpose. And that's what the crux of this video today is. So this was NBC News trying to put a warm spin on how it's a good thing that, planes are making these trails. And as they said, unlike most changes in the atmosphere caused by man, this one is beneficial. And someday weather researchers may be able to use jets on purpose to change our weather. Well, all of that took a sharp left turn in 2001, because when those planes crashed into the Twin Towers and September 11th happened, all flights in the continental United States were grounded. And during this time, something very unusual happened. And we're not gonna read through everything here. This is a quick overview kind of study, but basically how 9/11 changed the sky forever, and cocktail geoengineering and the sort. But as you can see here, in skies normally crosshatched with condensation trails, the only contrails seen in this image from September 12th, 2001 were left by the plane returning President George W. Bush to Washington from Nebraska and several escort fighters. So you got Air Force One and some F-16s escorting the president, and that's the only clouds in the sky other than this patch right here. And as a result, this gave scientists a window of opportunity to really look and see what's going on up in the sky. And they realized very quickly that there was actually a big change in what they call the diurnal temperature range. This was even previously mentioned in that 1980 video from NBC. And what they're really trying to say is that because, yes, clouds block sunlight coming in during the daytime, but at the same time, they're creating the Venus effect. Just like the planet Venus, it is covered in sulfuric acid rain clouds that will never go away, and the entire planet is uninhabitable because it is a greenhouse effect. It's not a greenhouse gas. It is that the clouds are so thick that incoming radiation, back to infographic I created, or what we would call solar radiation management in the geoengineering world, is not equal to Earth radiation management or outgoing solar radiation. So because this outgoing solar radiation is getting trapped, it is actually heating up the ground below. We also covered two videos ago how as far back as in the early 1900s, a gentleman by the name of Borisov actually talked about creating cloud blankets over the poles to melt the poles intentionally. So this isn't something that's new, although people claim that they, didn't really know. And they still don't fully understand whether these are cooling or heating, how much, when, where, why, and all that sort of thing. So this is an ongoing experiment with the pollution of the skies, with the vapor trails, with the contrails, with the contrail cirrus, with the plane farts. And it's been going on since the dawn of aviation. So let's just skip on through. We're not going to do cirrus cloud thinning or seeding. But basically, a guy by the name of Patrick Menace wrote a paper on this. And that's really where the big, bulk of change in attitude came from. And the paper was called Regional Variations in the U.S. Diurnal Temperature Range for the 11 through 14 September 2001 Aircraft Groundings, Evidence of Jet Contrail Influence on the Climate. And this was David Travis, to be clear. Menace is later. I always get the two mixed up. But this was published March of 2004. And, there's a lot of people who really raised red flags, wanted to just totally discount this. But what he was basically saying is that the diurnal temperature range, or the difference in temperature range between day and night, was shrunk considerably when there were clouds in the sky. Because when we had a cloudless sky because of September 11th, it actually got colder at night. Now, any of you that live in the northern United States, where it gets particularly cold, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, that when you have a cloudy night, it tends to be warmer. This is just something that you just inherently know. This should resonate with you. You should feel this one in your gut. But science wants numbers, and numbers to look over and peer review. So this being said, now that Travis has let the cat out of the bag, immediately you see a big shift in the scientific literature. And then you have the International Civil Aviation Organization adopt intentional contrail cirrus geoengineering policy. Now, this is where we go from, it was just pollution. All right, there's a sub. Appreciate you, Drago. We're getting one step closer to that 24K. Hit that sub button, guys. Get some new people in here. Share this thing. Sharing is caring. I really appreciate it. So the International Civil Aviation Organization, Ulrich Schumann, who is one of the top scientists on the subject of contrail cirrus, planes making clouds that turn into cirrus clouds. Hashtag cirrus clouds matter. Ulrich Schumann was basically at this meeting, the ICAO Colloquium on Aviation and Climate Change. And he said, hey, Quantum, thank you, ma'am. I greatly appreciate that. As horrific as this info is for humanity, I'm so grateful for your illumination. And thank you, too. I appreciate you. That Ulrich Schumann, when he was giving his presentation, this is his summary page. And the important part is highlighted for you and should be a red flag that we have now gone from what they call accidental geoengineering to intentional geoengineering. Now, I've argued with many scientists about this. I've argued with a lot of people about this. And they don't want to hear it, but you can't argue with, this is intent. This is intent to change what was just a contrail conundrum into a pollution solution, aka geoengineering, intentional geoengineering. And he says, contrail cirrus contributes to a large fraction of the aviation-induced climate impact, comparable to 50 years of aviation CO2. So the clouds have more of an impact on the climate than 50 freaking years of CO2 coming out of planes. That should be a huge red flag. IPCC doesn't say that in their reports. I said it in 2015 when I went to the EPA hearing. Enough said. Satellite data analysis suggests observable impact of aviation on cirrus cover and radiated fluxes. The climate impact of aviation-induced contrail cirrus depends on aircraft properties, e.g., soot emissions and routing, avoiding cirrus-forming regions. These cirrus-forming regions are known as ice supersaturated regions. We will probably get into that in another video. The methodology that they determine when a cloud is made, what effect it's going to have on the climate, and how they are made. But ice supersaturated regions generally are big bubbles of invisible water, which, when planes fly through them, create clouds. This is a lot of the reason why you see broken up chemtrails. This is one of the number one questions I get. How do they turn them on and off? One of the possibilities is the fact that when you fly through multiple different ISSRs, or ice supersaturated regions, you have a streak in that ice supersaturated region. You fly into a drier patch of air, there's no cloud left behind, and then they fly into the next one. Bam, you've got another line. You got to have water, you have to have a cloud seed, and ionization to make a cloud. So the dirt or soot, which is filled with metals, sticks to the water, sticks to it, that condenses, that makes a cloud. That cloud turns into ice, that's a cirrus cloud. That's the whole process in a nutshell. So when the debunkers come at you and they say this is just water vapor, you just look them in the eye or reply, water vapor sticking to what? Moving along. Both aspects offer the potential for aviation to reduce the climate impact of aviation, less soot emissions, less warming, and more cooling contrails. Predictable for operational planning. Now, why would Ulrich Schumann, addressing the International Civil Aviation Organization, say, Jesse, I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much, man or ma'am. I can't really tell. But I do really appreciate your generous donation. Less warming and more cooling contrails. Why would they want less warming or heat trapping contrails and more cooling contrails? So to be very specific, what this says to me is that the powers that be, the Federal Aviation Administration, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the guys who are in charge of running these flights, they have no intention, even though people have been complaining about planes making clouds that block out the sun since 1958. Palm Springs gripes. It's in 2 videos ago. Go watch it. If they've been complaining that long, and then they come back with, we don't want to get rid of the clouds, we want to take advantage of them. We want to make cooling clouds, but not warming clouds because, global warming, because polar bears and shit. So this is intent. This is intentional geoengineering. This is a red flag. This is what I latched onto. So how are they going to do that? That's the next question. Less warming, more cooling contrails, predictable for operational planning. Well, in order to predict when you're going to make them, well, you would need a tool. So they have this thing called, Ulrich Schumann came up with the Contrail Cirrus Simulation and Prediction Tool, COSIP. And it can basically say inputs, the aircraft, the movement through Eurocontrol, OAD, DFS, also the Aviation Environmental Design Toolkit, which is run by the FAA, meteorology from all the different sources, Contrail Cirrus Prediction Tool, showing where we think the planes are going to show up. And clearly these are ice supersaturated regions marked in red here. And you can see the gaps in between where they don't think they're going to appear, aka the broken lines that you see in the sky. Output, contrail, life cycle, coverage, and radiation, cirrus, obviously, because that's the big, thing that everybody misses. It's all about terminology here. Whether you call it a chemtrail, whether you call it a contrail, whenever it fans out and blocks out the sun, it becomes a cirrus cloud. And that's why cirrus clouds matter. And then they do all their studies on that sort of thing. And I follow up with another presentation. Contrails of larger aircraft are thicker and stay longer than smaller ones. More soot causes smaller ice particles, which sediment later and cause longer contrails, therefore. And that's also Ulrich Schumann. If you look up anything on Ulrich Schumann, go to scholar.google.com and put in U Schumann, and you're going to get a 3 months worth of reading, which I've done over the last decade for you, and I'm trying to simplify for you today. So buckle your seatbelt, let's move along. So that brings us to the point where jet biofuel enlisted for contrail control. Oh, that's right. I said jet biofuel enlisted for contrail control. And I think the summary here is pretty funny. Contrails might be a punchline in culture these days, thanks to the imaginative folks who have rechristened them chemtrails and embroidered them with elaborate theories involving government and corporate misdeed. But contrails are pretty serious business for a less conspiratorial reason. Scientists believe these ice clouds generated by water exhaust gases from aircraft engines could have a real impact on the climate, perhaps by cooling temperatures during the day and warming them at night. That's where a new phase in an ongoing NASA study comes into play. The space agency recently began doing flights over the Southern California desert, and their DC-8 flying laboratory is testing contrail consequences of using standard JP-8 jet fuel. That was what we talked about in the first video. I just started covering this again, how JP-8 jet fuel and the single fuel concept from 1988 to 1997, and the first article ever written about chemtrails, that article was about JP-8 jet fuel. JP-8 versus a 50-50 blend of JP-8 and a biofuel made from camelina plants. We believe this study will improve understanding of contrail formation and quantify potential benefits of renewable alternate fuels in terms of aviation's impact on the environment, said Ruben Del Rosario, manager of NASA's Fixed Wing project. And this is all part of what they call the access flights. And what they're talking about here, do they even mention access, right? Yeah, dubbed access. Alternative fuel effects on contrail and cruise emissions. So this was the experiments that they started flying to test out biofuels for contrail control. All of this is obviously well referenced on weathermodificationhistory.com. Come down here to the bottom and you can see I've got a whole lot of different references for this. And we're not going to go through them all, but basically you can see it for yourself. This is the access flights, actually a photo from them, how these emissions affect climate. And you can see over here, aerosol cloud interactions lead to contrails, contrails lead to clouds, and contrails lead to changes in temperature, sea level, ice, snow cover, precipitation, which affects agriculture, forestry, ecosystems, energy production and consumption, human health, and social effects like people losing their crap on the internet about chemtrails. And all of this leads to damages, social welfare, and costs. So there's, they got a lot of charts. We're gonna go to this video in just a second because I've got it already up on the screen. But what they did was, they tested. They didn't mention this in there, but they also said 3 different types of fuel were tested at the access flights. Let me blow this up big. So 3 different types of fuel were tested during the access flights. A low sulfur JP-8 fuel, a 50-50 blend of JP-8 and camelina based HEFA fuel. We could get into HEFA, but I think that'll make this video long. And the JP-8 fuel doped with sulfur. Doped with sulfur. Now that is a very unique terminology that is specifically about geoengineering. What do the geoengineers say they want to do? Mimic volcanoes. How do they say they want to do it? They want to put sulfur into the stratosphere, similar to what volcanoes do naturally, because sulfur has a cooling effect on the environment. So if we can add sulfur to the jet fuel, then we can cool the planet. So a JP-8 doped with sulfur. Hang on to that. More about that later in the video. And we can see here, this is from NASA. This is the actual Access 2 alternative jet fuel flight begins test May 7th, 2014. And, they got some pictures of their flying laboratory, which you can see here with all their test instruments. And they actually go in and, fly right behind a plane. And I have all of these in a playlist for you, which you can see here, and couple of videos I've made in the past on the subject. But onboard 747's record-breaking biofuel flight, first jumbo jet flight using biofuel. United Eco Skies, LAX Biofuel Initiative with Altair Fuels. First T45 using biofuels. First AV8B Harrier using biofuels. The Ospreys. Remember when all the Ospreys were crashing all the time? I wonder if that had anything to do with them switching to biofuels. But regardless, this is my playlist. The most interesting videos directly from the access flights themselves, which you can see here. And this is the DC-8 they're talking about, and the plane literally flying into the chemtrails. And as you can see, as they do this, you can see the particulate matter, ultrafine particles, fine particle concentration, and non-volatile particle concentration. As they fly in, you'll see it go off the charts. Oh, let's get a nice whiff of that chem. Oh, bruh. And then they're back out. Now, it goes without saying that flying into a plane's trails like this with wake vortices and all that's pretty dangerous. But this is obviously a talented pilot, and they're real interested in huffing them chemtrails. So this is the alternative fuel effects on contrails and cruise emission access flights and testing out biofuels for contrail control. So for those of you who have ever said to yourself or had someone say to you, why doesn't somebody fly up there, man, and sample the stuff, man? They're doing that. Trust me, they're doing that. Now, why does this matter? Because if you look over here on my blanket page for this, Cirrus Clouds Matter, it's at climateviewer.com/Cirrus Clouds Matter. The shady truth about chemtrails. And you scroll down. One of the frequently asked questions I have on here is, what are they doing about or with cirrus clouds? And you look and you see all of these different, citations from, the different scientific journals. And what do they all have in common? Well, let's just look. One exemplary technique may be via the jet fuel, as suggested by our prior work regarding metallic particles. How to seed by dispersal of seeding aircraft. Stratospheric Welsbach seeding for the reduction of global warming patent. And they said, why don't you just put it in the jet fuel? Ulrich Schumann, in situ means on-site observation of particles in jet aircraft exhaust and contrails from different sulfur-containing jet fuels. Direct detection of total sulfuric acid has been achieved for the first time in a plume of jet aircraft in flight. They got the same signatures when it was injected directly into the exhaust. That's your pump pipes theory, that they actually spray the chemicals, in this case sulfur, directly into the exhaust plume, or when the sulfur was provided to the engine via the fuel. Same. They got the same results. Influence of sulfur on composition of aircraft exhaust plumes. The experiment sulfur 1 through 7. Paul Crutzen, Nobel Prize winner. Albedo enhancement by stratospheric sulfur injections, a contribution to resolve a policy dilemma. Thanks for your input, Paul. Use commuter aircraft fuels doped with aerosol generators. Now, this is directly from William Cotton, Weather and Climate Engineering, at the 17th Conference on Planned and Inadvertent Weather Modification. I have the entire video of that on my YouTube channel, which you can watch right here. And you can see that's exactly what he said. Use commuter aircraft with their jet fuels doped with aerosol generators. Also, the use of UAVs or blimps or for aerosol dispersal could be considered. He said wide area seeding with soot or carbonaceous aerosols, carbon black dust, or calcium carbonate. So this is what we talked about with the NATO single fuel concept in the first video of this series that I just started again. Wide area seeding with soot or carbonaceous aerosols. Well, JP8 is loaded with 31,000 parts per billion of calcium. And a whole lot of sulfur and all of that sort of stuff. that only 1.7%, and he actually says, as noted by Crutzen, which I just mentioned, Paul Crutzen, only 1.7% of the mass of sulfur is needed to produce a similar magnitude of surface cooling. So by adding only 1.7% of the mass of the actual jet fuel, sulfur, to the planes, you could cool the entire planet. Amazing. A potential delivery mechanism for seeding material is already in place. The airline industry. Stratospheric injection of sulfur species using the airline industry. Dissolved or suspended in their jet fuel and later burned with the fuel. This is from David Mitchell, Modification of Cirrus Clouds to Reduce Global Warming, 2009. Addition of sulfur to the fuel released the aerosol through the exhaust system of the plane by Alan Robach, Benefits and Risks and Costs of Stratospheric Geoengineering, 2009. Injection of H2SO4, sulfuric acid, in a condensable vapor from an aircraft. And this is another one. Efficient formation of stratospheric aerosol for climate engineering by emission of condensable vapor from aircraft. Another exemplar technique examined was the use of commercial passenger aircraft flying at high altitudes to inject sulfate aerosols emitted by aviation fuel into the stratosphere. This is from Studying Geoengineering with the Climate Model COOL project from the Academy of Finland 2014. And then we have the access flights with the JP8 fuel doped with sulfur. In situ measurements of contrail properties measured during the 2013-2014 access project. And then finally, the paper that really kind of just brings it all together and says, how the hell are they going to do this? Applying high fuel sulfur content at aviation cruise altitude combined with ultra low sulfur jet fuel, biofuels, at lower altitude results in a reduced aviation-induced mortality and increased negative RE compared to the baseline aviation scenario. I'm going to translate this for you because I know this is really techie and really nerdy and sciencey. This is from the paper called Impacts of Aviation Fuel Sulfur Content on Climate and Human Health from 2015. This is probably the most damning paper of all of them because it really sets the tone for the agenda. So the agenda is this. If you live near an airport and you've ever had that black dust covering your cars, and if you look at the mortality rates, people dying near major airports because of all the exhaust fumes, their goal, according to this paper, is to use biofuels on takeoff. But then when they get up to altitude, because that'll produce less soot, less carbon black dust when they're taking off. Okay? And that'll kill less people because they won't breathe that dust in. But then when they get up into the altitude where they want to actually geoengineer the planet, they're going to switch to high fuel sulfur content fuels. So the obvious question becomes this. How the hell do you do that? How in the absolute hell do you go from one fuel to another in the same plane? And this question plagued me for quite some time. So, of course, I went to the patent office because that's where all the money's at. And you follow the money and bam, you have your solution. This is a graphic directly from the FICA COOL project. Commercial aircraft could be used to deliver sulfate into stratosphere by increasing fuel sulfur content and the flight altitude of intercontinental flights. So fly higher, fly dirtier, cooler planet, geoengineering intentionally using a pollution solution. That's what biofuels and doped sulfur jet fuel is all about. There are many layers to this. We're going to break it down individually in each of these videos. First video was about the long history, 1988 to 1997, the birth of the word chemtrail, how it was about JP8 jet fuel and how dirty that stuff is and its effect on the climate, and why there seemed to be a doubling, tripling, 10 times the amount of clouds 1997 on. The next video was about 1948 to 1970, when the airline industry got sued for blocking out the sun and nothing was done about it. This video is about biofuels and sulfur doped fuel and how in the current world today, what are they doing to control the clouds? And he who controls the weather controls the world. Lyndon Johnson. And as they said very clearly in this picture, the sulfur content of the fuel should be increased to about 50 times the current level to have a significant cooling effect. The cooling effect would be confined to the northern hemisphere, because if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're typically brown, and they love watching brown people die, unfortunately. So it's going to get wetter and cooler in the northern hemisphere and drier and deader in the southern hemisphere. Just let that sink in for a second. Moving along. So, as I posed the question, how could you possibly use two fuels in one plane? Applying high fuel sulfur content at aviation cruise altitude combined with ultra low sulfur jet fuel aviation biofuel at lower altitudes. I kept, just ringing on this one. I said, man, I got to figure this one out. And the answer came to me on the patent office. And wouldn't you know it, I love to give you guys the reference. There's your number. Look it up yourself. Fuel system for vapor trail control. Not good enough for you? I can do better. U.S. patent application, 2013. Fuel delivery system. 2 jet fuels, 1 fuel tank. Contrail control. And they show the ice supersaturated air, or ISSRs, ice supersaturated regions, how they can avoid them or fly through them and take advantage of that by dumping sulfur into them. Question in chat, are they going to using graphene oxide? That's going to be one of the last videos in the series, because the graphene oxide stuff, I do have information on that. Don't believe me. I have a section right here called graphene, and I literally have this. I'll just throw it up there just so you know I am digging into this. But how about that? Wrong button. Application of graphene oxide in Jet A1 in air to enhance combustion process. It's going to be a new video, but more information to come on that. Okay? Don't rush me. But it's coming. It's coming, okay? Just know that it's coming. We got to work our way up to that. There's still a lot that people, it's remedial time right now, and we need to get everybody caught up to date. So, being able to use 2 jet fuels in one single fuel tank and switch between the two in this patent application, I thought that was hella interesting. Okay, so now you can use 2 jet fuels to do what they're talking about, but let's do even better. Control unit and method for controlling the supply of a vehicle with multiple fuels. U.S. Patent Application 2011. And it actually shows how the jet fuel electronic control unit could switch between the 2 fuels. So you could go from the ultra low sulfur jet biofuel to the doped, dirty JP8 sulfur-laden fuels to cool the planet. So back to that question about on-off chemtrails. I think we have a solution right here. This is one of the possibilities. Clearly, patents aren't just for thought experiments. In a lot of cases, there are patents that don't make it to ever, being commercially used. But we're talking about a patent application back in 2011, and there are multiple of these, patents on using multiple fuels in a commercial aircraft. And that ties directly in with the idea that they would use those chemicals to cool the planet, to be able to switch from biofuels to sulfur-laden doped fuels, similar to ship tracks with bunker fuel that are heavily sulfur-laden fuels. They create more clouds. They create more soot. Water sticks to the soot. The soot is coated in sulfuric acid. That is, by definition, what geoengineers have attempted to, do for a very long time. So I actually interviewed Dr. Rangasai Halthori, FAA scientist. We want clouds by day, none by night. And this was Dr. Halthori from the FAA Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative. He is the head of the department. And I spoke with him on the phone 3 separate times. I do believe I have an interview of that with all 3 phone conversations combined somewhere hidden on my channel. If you dig deep enough, you'll find it. Maybe we'll even bring it back to life and replay it sometime. But regardless, he said some really interesting crap. And, like I said, this is kind of remedial material. As you can see, I was basically, my articles were kind of like some of these videos. This is kind of the whole series in one, from, the jet, Palm Springs problem in 1958, and on down to the lawsuits, how they never stopped making clouds because, Chicago was still complaining about them and all that sort of thing. The video I just played for you, 9/11. We didn't actually watch this one. Why don't we throw this one up there just to rehash this. This is 2006, CBS, change of tune.
These amateur astronomers planned on a perfect night of stargazing.
Okay, unlock right ascension, please.
But overhead, jets are spinning a web of clouds.
There's a fairly fresh contrail forming behind that jet. It's already spreading out to form a wider cloud than it was when it came out of the jet.
As air traffic increases, so does the amount of exhaust released high in the sky. And what's been an inconvenience for some
I still don't see it.
is becoming a growing concern for others who say jets and their contrails may accelerate global warming.
We're really not getting to grips with this problem at all.
Only 3% of all man-made greenhouse gases comes from aircraft. But new research suggests that jet exhaust is 4 times better at trapping heat than ground emissions, with contrails playing a critical role.
Contrails form at high altitudes when hot jet engines pass through cold, moist air. The clouds spread out, trapping heat rising from the surface.
Those clouds can have quite significant warming effects.
This satellite photo of the southeast U.S. shows how contrails can blanket an entire region.
It could be an influence that we really have to be concerned about.
When air traffic was grounded after September 11th, NASA scientist Patrick Minnis was astonished to see contrails from just 6 fighter jets cover more than 11,000 square miles.
We learned that one contrail can produce a very large cloud.
Other scientists noticed without commercial traffic, the daily temperature range widened by as much as 5 degrees. Minnis now believes contrail clouds increased surface temperatures in the United States up to 1 full degree between 1975 and 1994.
It's just one of a number of aircraft effects that together could produce a significant signal.
Responding to that signal is a challenge for aircraft engineers who've been stalled on contrails but have made progress in other areas. Boeing's next generation of fuel-efficient planes produces 20% less of the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide.
For every pound of fuel that is not used, that's 3 pounds of CO2 that is not emitted.
Just to interrupt, didn't we just say that the clouds are 4 times more heat trapping than the CO2? So does anybody really need to continue to argue about CO2 when this is clearly the problem coming out of planes? I mean, literally farting out of planes and heating up the planet and turning us into Venus. I mean, look at Venus. Look at our skies. Please continue with the BS.
For now, flying lower would reduce contrails, but would increase noise.
It's a shame because there's a lot of treasures out there that people just aren't having an opportunity to see.
And fewer still may get the chance. One study predicts contrails will make ground-based astronomy impossible by 2050. Whether contrails will have a lasting impact on climate remains hazy. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
So right there at the end, he said, the telescopes might be a problem, because of these darn clouds. Well, let's just throw this in the mix. Telescopes worthless by 2050. Ground-based astronomy could be impossible in 40 years because of pollution from aircraft exhaust trails and climate change. And climate change, my ass. And aircraft exhaust trails. Ground-based telescopes worthless by 2050. This is why I do what I do. This is why I'm concerned about this. I don't care about what your belief system is on the word chemtrail, contrail, contrail cirrus, vapor trail, smoke pollution in the sky, whatever the hell you want to call it. I want my children's children and their children to be able to see the stars. I don't want our planet to end up like frickin' Venus. And I've clearly shown you the evidence that they have no intention of stopping making clouds. They just want to use those clouds to cool the planet, and that is a problem. So following up, we'll kind of end right here. The FAA scientists I talked to, they have another example. This is over the UK of one AWACS plane literally covering the entire country in a cirrus cloud. And it's circling right there and then it fanning out and covering almost the entire UK. That's one plane by itself. So that's why this is during Cossack. But anyway, we won't get into all that. But they said that basically that contrail was 5,000 times greater than recent estimates of the average persistent contrail radiative forcing from the entire civil aviation fleet. That these clouds have more of an effect on the climate than all of the CO2 emitted since the start of aviation. Sister Golden Hair, have a coffee or a tea. Thank you very much. I will have a coffee right now, and I really appreciate your donation. Thank you. So delicious. Well, anyway, so I interviewed the good scientists, and this is the final video. And I'm not going to play it because the BBC is just full of crap. And they said, after all the data was analyzed, there was an increase in temperature. That suggests that contrails cool the planet. No, it doesn't. And then this is 2011, and they totally, this is fake news. So I'm not even going to play it because it doesn't deserve to be played. And of course, then that's when Chuck Long came out and admitted that, in fact, what the heck? What the heck? What? That's not right. Oh, yeah, that's the accidental geoengineering thing. Anyway, moving along. To prove the point, cloud blanket warms up melting ice cap. Greenland ice sheet melts more when it's cloudy. Clouds enhance Greenland ice sheet meltwater runoff. Clouds like blankets trap heat and are melting the Greenland ice sheet. And these are all scientific papers. You can go look them up. Let's see if they still exist. Oh, they do. Cloud blanket warms up melting ice cap. And of course, I said all this in 2015 when I went to the EPA. All of these articles are dated after that. And I love being right. This is January 2016. September 2015, I was saying all this in front of the EU, in front of the EPA. And then magically, it became news everywhere. Like suddenly scientists wanted to admit this in public or something. I don't know what's going on. Just a coincidence? I'm sure. Not. The whole point of this is that when I interviewed Dr. Angasai Halthori, and you can view the entire thing on Scribd, but basically I asked him and, some questions, what makes a contrail? And he gives his answer. What makes a contrail that would normally dissipate or persist, i.e. become contrail cirrus? And he gives his answers. What is the FAA? How does the FAA view contrail cirrus? A pollution problem that should be removed from the sky, or a potential climate mitigation, option? Geoengineering. Straight to him. Contrail cirrus cloud, like a precursor contrail, is made of ice. Blah blah blah. The problem is not as much a pollution problem, as it is perhaps an aesthetic one, particularly in the West. Climate mitigation using contrails or contrail cirrus is not possible, or as they both are both positive forces. In other words, they increase warming. Even though they appear white, indicating they reflect sunlight, blah, blah, blah. See, he tries to skirt the issue. So, of course, I expected this, and I dug deeper with my questions. I only sent him 10 questions. It's my understanding that contrail cirrus is a hot topic these days, following the two papers from Minnis and Lee, 9/11 contrail diurnal temperature range, and 2008 Iceland volcano flight groundings. Could you please explain? And of course, he goes into that. And then he says this. Let me see if I can get it. Might help if I actually spell the right thing. Nope, it's not going to find it in there. I can't search inside the actual document because I'd have to go to Scribd to actually do it. But basically, he says, we would like to have more clouds by day, none by night. And I asked him specifically, what do you think Ulrich Schumann meant when he was saying less warming, more cooling, contrails predictable for operational control? Not sure where he says this and in what context. Bro, don't play with me. I actually sent him this PDF. I sent him a link with an MLA reference. He read it, but in his response, he acted like he never heard it before. So this is the head of the FAA pretending like I never saw that. During night, they trap infrared heat causing heating. So it's a balance between the two time intervals. We would like to have more CICs during the day and none by night. And by CICs, he says contrail-induced cirrus. So he claims that he doesn't know what Ulrich Schumann's talking about, that he's never heard less warming, more cooling contrails predictable for operational control, but then goes on to say, we, meaning the FAA, would like to have more contrail-induced cirrus clouds during the day and none during the night. Which kind of brings us to the end of this video. Of course, they did go on after the access flights to do what are called the NASA DLR multidisciplinary airborne experiments, and which is the ND-MAX, and then the emissions and climate impact of alternative fuel, ECLIF-2. And these are more biofuel studies. These were in January of 2018. I still haven't been able to get the results of these experiments, so I will dig into that in a future date. But regardless, they are still continuing to test. Results of those flights showed that using a 50-50 blend of biofuel and regular fuel to the power jet engines reduced soot emissions by as much as 50 to 70%, which goes back to the whole killing less people around airports issue. But regardless, that's Indy Max and eCliff 2. But I want to really end on this note. So what is he talking about here? We would like to have more contrail-induced cirrus clouds during the day and none during the night. So you have to ask yourself, how do they create clouds by day and none by night? And I have the answer for you coming up in the next video. And it has something to do with what they call cirrus cloud thinning, or cirrus cloud seeding, depending on the paper you're reading about. And they talk about using chemicals to melt the clouds away at night, or even crazy ideas like shooting laser beams at the chemtrails, at the cirrus clouds that they created, to break up the ice into smaller particles so that heat can escape back into space. Have you noticed in your local climate a bunch of clouds during the day and then a star-filled night? I have. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that this idea of using biofuels for contrail control, that using fuels doped with sulfur to geoengineer the planet, do you think this is reality? Do you think I'm pulling your leg? You think I'm full of crap? Am I full of sulfur? Let me know in the comments. I have done my homework. I think that if you review this material yourself, you too will agree that this is the truth. If this does not resonate with you, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what I'm missing. Jim@climateviewer.com. Everybody's free to hit me up with an email anytime. I'm always looking for more information. I am not too proud to admit when I'm wrong, but I also feel very strongly about this, that we're on the right path to figuring out the total picture. So we've covered NATO and how they screwed up the sky. And the first article about chemtrails was about JP8 fuel and all the metals in them. We covered how this was a problem all the way back as early as 1948 and 1958, Palm Springs versus the Air Force, and the Air Force telling them to screw off, either move the town or live with the trails. And today we're covering jet biofuels and sulfur dope fuel to cool the planet and how they intend to do that. In the next video, we'll cover how they plan on melting the clouds away at night so that they only get the cooling effect during the day and none of the heat trapping effect at night. But riddle me this. Jet fuel is made by who? Oil companies. And oil companies like making money. And oil companies for over 100 years have wanted to melt the poles. Why? Because there is so much gas and oil to be had there. So we have this tug of war between the climate change advocates who say we got to save the polar bears and shit, and the oil companies that supply the jet fuel who may just be greenwashing and saying, yeah, this is going to actually cool the planet. But we know for a fact those clouds that are being created are melting the Arctic. Who do you think's going to win in this battle? This battle called the New Cold War. Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, we're real close to 24,000 subs. Please help out with that by subscribing. Send new people to the channel. Get them over here. I will be creating some alternative platforms to upload. I was streaming to like DLive and Twitch and stuff, but they don't actually save my videos permanently. I don't like that. So I will be creating like a BitChute account. I'll I was also suggested Odyssey and Rumble. I may go to Rockfin, but I want to have multiple backups of the entire video. So as I'm doing these videos right now, I am locally recording them as well. So I have the original quality and everything, and I can upload them to other places at a later date. And you can always support my work by giving a monthly donation on Patreon or a one-time donation on PayPal or GoFundMe. My family could really use the help, and I need new equipment, and hopefully one day I'll be able to build a studio and do way more videos and do way more work, because I won't be working out of my living room. So with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found this informative. And with this information comes power. With power comes great responsibility. So please use these videos, these articles, the timeline on weather modification history, and all these references to arm yourself with truth and power to attack ideas, not people. Love you, mean it.